سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح يسعك الفضاء الرحيب الفسيح سبيل الدموع.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our series on Muslims in non-Muslim lands, a legal study with applications. And as we mentioned in the last episode, we've now reached the point where we're going to discuss the Usul al-Fiqh. And the Usul al-Fiqh is sort of the legal theory, the underpinning structure under the fiqh itself, the positive law. Now, I did mention at the end of the last episode that this is going to be quite challenging. It will be delivered over two parts. I hope you can sort of stay with me. It would be very useful if you had the text itself, so you could follow the text, because I'm not going to be able to go into too much detail. One is because I do want to keep these lectures of a sort of comfortable size. I've got a feeling this one is going to possibly reach an hour, and also I want to keep the series as well balanced. As a result, I may skip bits from the text itself, just to sort of give you an overview. And that's really been the aim when I've talked about the development of madhahib, or with particular the development of the Hanafi madhab and how it's structured, and will also be for the next few chapters. So with that disclaimer out there, let's make a start. And the text, for those of you who are interested, is a text which is used in most madaris throughout the world, which is the text of Usul al-Shashi. I'm not going to go into detail as to the author of Usul al-Shashi and what it's about and how it's based. I'm really just going to go straight into the text. And in my work, you'll be able to see a closer translation to the actual original, whereas what I'm going to share with you is going to be somewhat paraphrased and more succinct, based on the 2 points that I made at the start. So Usul al-Fiqh is based on 4. And what are the 4? The book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yani al-Quran, the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, consensus of opinion of the Ummah, which is referred to as ijma, and analogical reasoning, which is referred to as qiyas. Now, I kept that quite general. Some people will disagree and say, well, qiyas is quite a specific type of analogical reasoning. I've kept it broad, and the reason why I've kept it broad is because we see many other different practices of reasoning, whether it's istihsan and other types in other madhahib, where you start to see that there is a larger element of reasoning than just this sort of a syllogism type of reasoning, which qiyas might be closer in relation to. So for that reason, I'm going to keep that broad. And this is going to be, and what are these sources for? What is Usul al-Fiqh for? Basically, we need to understand each one of them, and then as a result, how we bring about ahkam or rulings. Now, the first of the 2 are what we can categorically call sources, because the Quran is a source and the Sunnah is a source. And I've discussed that in great detail in the 2 parts, if I'm not mistaken, on the hermeneutical approach or the hermeneutical analysis of source texts. So that's there for all to see. And ijma, which is the third, has value if it is based on the first 2 sources, or rather, if not based on the first 2 sources, it does not contradict the first 2 sources, especially when the second source, that which is established and that's which is accepted. So just as an example, if the Muslim Ummah were to come together on a consensus, even within the scholars, that the consumption of alcohol now become legal, then that would not change the original prohibition. However, that wouldn't happen. You might say, why wouldn't that happen? Because as we'll see later, for the justification of ijma, is that the Muslim Ummah wouldn't agree on deviation. There will always be, because the way the Muslim Ummah has been protected, and this concept of ijma is solely for the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. This wasn't given to the other faiths, the other people of the book previously. It was solely for the Ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it is protected. So even though I gave you that, for instance, or the Muslim Ummah coming together about the legality of alcohol consumption, that wouldn't happen. So that's a hypothetical situation. It wouldn't happen because, as I mentioned to you, the fact that the Ummah is protected from coming to agreement on falsehood or error. Qiyas, again, is a technique, it's a methodology, it's an approach to be able to take limited and finite source texts and take the underlying principles and apply those in so many various situations, so many various scenarios, so to show its applicability, to show that it can be applied in these various circumstances. So in essence, what we're saying is that these four are the means on which Islamic law is based, and that's what comes about. So let's get into the body of it. And so we're going to start with the first discussion, which is obviously going to be on the Quran. Now, in the Quran, we come across words because the Quran is a book of words. It's this statements, sentences. The Kalamullah, this is the uncreated word of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. They are words that bring about meaning. So when we read them, we take meaning from them, when we recite them. So those of us who know Arabic, when we're reading Surah Al-Fatiha, or when we're reading a particular surah, we understand what those words mean. Now, we're not saying that those words are limited in that particular meaning that we take from it at that time, but the general words, what they mean is clear for all who can understand Arabic. But for the legal experts, they had to go beyond the just sort of word understanding of the terms, but they also had to look at the type of word which was used. So let me give you a scenario. There is a differentiation which is brought about in words, something which is called khas, which is specific, and something which is called am, which is general. And when we mean by khas, what we're saying is that it's a specific known meaning or for a specific known subject. So when I use the word Zayd, then Zayd is for a particular individual. I'm specifying a particular person. If I was to say man, then I'm specifying a particular gender. And if I was to say human, then I'm specifying a particular species. Am is more general, okay? It does indicate a single meaning, but it includes everything without any specification or limit. So there's no specification there. So if I was to use the word Muslims, then I would be referring to all the Muslims. I wouldn't be referring to some Muslims. Now let's see this in action. Now we have an ayat in Surah Baqarah, ayat number 228, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ. And those women who are divorced, the divorced women, they should wait, or they should restrain, meaning restraining from marriage or refraining from marriage. بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ, for how long? ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ, for 3 quru. Now the word quru I've left not translated, but the word quru means, in the general sense, it means cycles. Now the Ahnaf say that the word thalatha is khas, it is specific. What they mean by that, or what the rulings a specific word carries, is that that word has to be acted upon, because it's specific. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specified how long a woman who is divorced has to wait before she can remarry. That has been specified. So this word thalatha is not just randomly selected, it is a specific word which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen to use, which means it is necessary, it is binding to wait for that time period. Now the question which comes up is the word which follows, quru. Now if you notice, A, I refrained from trying to translate it, and B, when I did give it a translation, I used the word cycle. And the reason why I use the word cycle, because the word quru has numerous meanings, or in this case, 2 specific meanings, which are contradictory. One meaning it can have is tuhr, a pure cycle. And the other meaning it can have is a cycle of menstruation, hayd. So it can mean both. So was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referring to 3 quru by saying that she must wait for 3 menstrual cycles? Or was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referring to 3 cycles, and in this case referring to 3 cycles of purity? Now this is where the scholar is required. Some will say, well, why do we need to interpret the Quran? Why do we need to try to understand the Quran? Why can't we just act upon it as it is? And it kind of challenges the whole idea of a hermeneutical approach, as I discussed in the parts which preceded. But this clearly shows that there's a need for scholars, adequate, capable scholars, mujtahid mutlaq, those who have the capacity to be able to legally have access to the Quran and derive to determine the ahkam within that, within the Quran itself and within the hadith. So now we have to try to understand, how is it that this word quru, what does it mean? Well, when you look at the word quru, and I'll discuss this later, you'll see, or I'll discuss it, in fact I'll bring it up now, you'll see that for it to be acted upon, the only way it is possible is if quru is taken to mean a menstrual, rather than quru is taken to mean a pure cycle. Okay, so meaning a menstrual cycle is counted as quru. So how does that work? Well, first of all, a divorce cannot be issued to a woman unless she is in her tuhr. So when a divorce is issued in her tuhr, then the first hayd which comes is counted as one. Then it's followed by another tuhr. Then the next hayd which comes is counted as two. Then another tuhr. And then the next hayd which comes is counted as three. And then eventually, as soon as the fourth tuhr starts, or as soon as the tuhr starts after that hayd, then she is completed 3 cycles, and the word 3 has been adhered to. But if we were to take it to mean pure cycles, then again we start with the man issuing divorce to her during her tuhr. Now that could be 1 day into her tuhr, or it could be 14 days into her tuhr. Irrespective, that first tuhr cannot count as a full tuhr. So then fine, they wait for the hayd, and after the hayd another tuhr comes, so that can be counted as 1. Then they wait for the hayd, another one comes, that can be counted as 2. Then they wait for the hayd, and then another tuhr comes, that can be counted as 3. So they say, we've got 3. But you also got the tuhr in which the talaq was issued. So you've actually got 3.5, or 3 3/4, or 3 1/3, or whatever. And if we don't count that, and if we say, well, okay, he will give tuhr, he will count the only 2 of them, and not the third one, because he gave talaq in the first one, now the issue which comes up is that there's 2 tuhr and a half, so now it's 2.5. So we can't meet the 3. It's impossible to meet the 3 unless we act upon the understanding that quru means menstrual cycles, and that's what the Hanafi madhab gives. So here was a simple point regarding how a word can be understood as khas, or how a word can be understood as am. Now am also comes with its specificity in terms of, is am always am? Can you specify from that group? And there's much discussion, as you'll find in that particular topic on there. But I did say that I'm conscious of what I'm trying to achieve. I'm conscious of what I'm trying to achieve in the time frame as well. And I'm also conscious of my objective for the series. So with those 3 points, and I did say at the beginning that I'm going to somewhat skim through this. Maybe in the future sometime, inshallah ta'ala, I may look at Usul as a separate topic and deliver that over a period of time as a series itself. But for now, we're going to restrict ourselves just to kind of cover the topic in a sort of a possibly superficial way, but it's really to just give you an understanding as to the fact that we need a hermeneutical approach. That's point number 1 of my purpose. And point number 2 is that the Hanafi hermeneutical approach has an approach, has an Usul al-Fiqh, has a legal theory which allows us to access the sources and apply our reasoning in order to reach answers, which will then be applied in a few episodes down the road in applications that we find ourselves in within Britain or in any Western country for that matter. There's also other types of word which we just touched upon, and one is mushtarak. Okay. Sorry, before I get to mushtarak, one is we're going to talk about sort of pairs of words now. Pair of word that we have here is mutlaq and muqayyad. And mutlaq is an absolute word, and muqayyad is qualified. So, for instance, when we see something which isn't qualified, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, then wash your faces. Okay? فَغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ. Then wash your faces. This is referring to wudu. Now, if you notice, this is mutlaq. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not mentioned anything else associated with it, that wash your faces from the top of your forehead down to the bottom of your chin. Or wash your faces rather when making niyyah. Or, for example, if we look at the full ayat, which refers to the فَغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ, and it mentions the various body parts to wash and body part to wipe. It doesn't suggest that there must be a niyyah required beforehand. It doesn't suggest that the tartib is wajib or necessary, the order. It doesn't suggest that it should be continuous, one after the other, without one body part drying, and other matters, which do exist within the narrations, the Khabr al-Wahid in particular. It does exist. But this explanation or this discussion with respect to washing the faces, the arms, the feet, and the wiping of the head, this is understood as being mutlaq. And mutlaq means that the Quran should be acted upon in as much as possible in its most absoluteness, rather than it being muqayyad, qualified in any way. That, oh, wudu is not valid unless you say Bismillah, or wudu is not valid unless you make a niyyah. If that had been the case, then that would have come through a stronger source rather than Khabr al-Wahid. So the view here is, so the Usul is saying here that when something is mutlaq, or when something can be applied as mutlaq, it should be applied as mutlaq. It shouldn't be qualified in any way using sources like the Khabr al-Wahid and Qiyas. Now, Khabr al-Wahid is a term that I've used, and Khabr al-Wahid is for our listeners, is a less powerful source. It's a less evidential source when it comes to deriving law in particular. And this is what I'm talking about in this series, is deriving law. I'm not talking about the use of Khabr al-Wahid in other matters. It's just here in this particular context that I'm using it. So there's certain words which are absolute, certain words which are muqayyad. Next we can look at is another two terms which I was going to, is mushtarak and mu'awwal. Mushtarak is a homonym, okay, and mu'awwal is something which has been interpreted beyond its obvious meaning. And I did say we'll come back to this, and this is the word quru. And the word quru is a mushtarak, okay. It's a word which possesses two meanings. It can be a tuhur cycle, or it can be a hayd cycle. And mu'awwal is how we qualified it, or maybe I shouldn't use the word qualified, but how we interpreted it until it became a particular meaning. And the way we did that in that case was that we understood it to mean a cycle of hayd. Now there's a possibility that we could be wrong. However, we need to act on something, and we can't say, oh, this word is mushtarak, so it could mean this or it could mean that, so we're not sure what. We have to apply, well, not we, the mujtahid mutlaq had to apply themselves in order to reach that answer, and once they reach that answer, then that's for us. They were required by their station and their position to bring that about. So we have that as well to look at. Then there's this concept of haqiqah and majaz, and haqiqah is the word literally or lexically. So what was the word composed for, the composer of the language? What was their purpose for this word? What did they want to mean by this word? And majaz is the metaphorical meaning. How is it being used now within society? What does it mean? And for instance, we could say the word tree. So when the word tree was originally coined, it meant a organic matter which grows out from the ground, and it has bark, and it has a trunk, and it has leaves and branches, and that was the word tree. But now the word tree can mean something else. If you're talking in a subject, it could mean a tree diagram, and what you're meaning now is you're actually drawing a structure in which you have a central starting point which then branches out as you're discussing that. So that's another meaning. One is the haqiqah ma'na, one is the majaz meaning. In the Sharia, for instance, it's used in other ways. We have a verse of the Quran, Surah number 4, ayat number 43, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِن كُنْتُم مَرْضَى أَوْ عَلَى سَفْرٍ أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنكُم مِّنَ الْغَائِطِ أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ. That if you are marda, ill, or you are upon a journey, or one of you has come from answering the call of nature, or lamastumun nisa, or if you have, and if I take the lexical, literal meaning, lamastumun nisa means if you've touched a woman. But if I was to take the majaz meaning, it would mean that if you had intercourse with a woman. So then what the ulama are doing is using a methodology in order to derive which of the two it will be. And here obviously much discussion has gone on to this, to say that in the case if we took the haqiqi ma'na, or those who do take the haqiqi ma'na, they have to exclude certain people. So they would say, well, it doesn't mean a baby, it doesn't mean somebody's wife, it doesn't. So they're having to exclude and not act upon the verse, or not act upon the word in its absoluteness. And as we've said, one of our principles is to minimize interpretation in the Quran. And if we act upon la mastamun nisa as a majaz meaning, as a metaphorical meaning referring to intercourse, then in that case the majaz meaning will allow us not to take out certain groups or take out certain individuals. So it will allow us to work absolute nature. So that's again how the Ahnaf apply their usul. Then haqiqah can split into a number of areas. It could be muta'adhira, mahjura, and musta'mala. So we have the first two, where it's muta'adhira, which is unfeasible. Mahjura is, that's not the way usually people act upon it. And the final one is musta'mala, is that's how people use it. In the first two cases, we would tend to go to the majaz ma'na, the metaphorical meaning. Whereas in the latter case, obviously, if it's musta'mal, is used. So muta'adhira, what would we say if a person said that, I'll give an example, that I won't eat from this tree. Okay, I will not eat from this tree. And then when we're talking about the eating from the tree itself, is muta'adhira. Obviously, he's not going to eat the bark. He's not. So what was he referring to? When he said, "I'm not going to eat this tree." So a man says, here's a better, now I've finally got my words right. He says, I'm not going to eat this tree. And what does he mean by that when he takes an oath? Obviously what he's referring to is that he's referring to the fruit of the tree. So if he took an oath that, wallahi, I won't eat this tree. And then he's seen later eating the bark of the tree. Has he broken his vow? No, he hasn't. You might think, well, hold on, he's eating from his tree. Why? Well, when a person says, I will not eat from this tree, or I will not eat this tree, what they're referring to is the fruit from the tree, because that's what's normally eaten. So this is muta'adhira, yani it is unfeasible for it to be assumed that he was referring to the actual eating of the tree, and words to that effect. Mahjura, for example, is something which is abandoned due to the customary use. So if I was to say, I swear, wallahi, I'm not going to step foot in his house. Okay, I swear I'm not going to step foot in his house. What I do then is, well, I decide, hold on, I do want to go visit him now. So I get a wheelchair, I sit in the wheelchair, and it's an electronic wheelchair, and I make my way into the person's house. And someone says, hold on, you said you weren't going to step foot in his house. I said, well, I'm not stepping foot in his house, I'm still in the wheelchair. Now, when we mean by stepping foot in the house, we don't actually mean that when someone says that they're not going to step foot in the house. What we mean by that is that I'm not going to go see this person. So we abandon, this is something where it's mahjura. So it's abandoned, where we abandon the lexical, the literal meaning, and we apply the metaphorical meaning. So you can see here how much work is required. And I'm really, I know I've repeated this several times. I am not even, to say I'm skimming the surface is an exaggeration. I'm really just picking points up and just giving you a flavor. And yeah, it's a complicated topic, and we've already taken considerable time, and we're nowhere near the end. Just to get an idea just to give an idea to the viewer of how detailed and how complicated the legal theory is, and how to just sort of debunk it and throw it to one side and think that it's now no longer applicable is a serious crime, really, against the whole concept, and is academically unfair. Furthermore, we have other words, which is sarih, unequivocal, and kinaya, elusive, and we see these as well. Sarih is something which has plain meaning. Kinaya is something which is the meaning is hidden. I guess the thing which springs to mind is the issue of divorce. A person can use sarih, clear, unequivocal words, I've divorced you, saying it like that, and that's clear what he means by that. There's nothing, you don't really need an explanation what he means by that. But then a man could also say to his wife, get out of my face, or that's it with me and you, or I've had enough of you, it's over. Now these are kinaya, what's over? The argument is over. I was having this discussion is over. I've had enough of you. I want to take some time out, come back in a bit, so we can carry on this argument. What does it mean by the word? What does it mean by this statement? So this one, in this case, now the intention needs to be sought. So you can see here how the rulings will change depending on the words individuals use. And then we have what's termed as mutaqabilat. And mutaqabilat here are referring to as the antonyms. And so you have here zahir, which is all these are on the clarity of the statement, and then we have a number of others which are directly opposite in terms of the ambiguity of the statement. So we have a zahir, which is apparent. Above that we have nas, which is explicit. Above that which we have mufassir, which is explained, and above that we have muhkam, which is firm. Then the antonyms of those we have is khafi, which is hidden, mushkil, problematic, mujmal, ambiguous, and mutashabih, intricate. And intricate here, what I mean by this is that it's beyond understanding really, unless somebody tells us what it is that that word means. It's in that kind of a not coded, but it's deeply mysterious in terms of what it means. Now I can sort of go on and give you examples of where they're used in the Quran. For example, we see nas being used with respect to riba and how it's been mentioned. So in fact, I'll use that example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat number 275, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made bay permissible, wa harama riba, and He's made riba impermissible. Okay? And this verse was to clarify the difference between trading and usury. And it was to rebut the claim by some non-Muslims that they were the same thing. They said, well, look, we can't see the difference. If I have this book and I buy this book for £10 and then I sell it to you for £20, I've made a profit of £10. Similarly, if I have 1 kilogram of gold and I exchange it for 1.5 kilogram of gold, I made a profit. What's the difference? And this was the argument. They saw no difference because riba lexically means an increase, something which is improving, something which is adding to what you had before. So they said, well, that's what we do in business. You wouldn't be a very good businessman if you made a decrease every time and you didn't make, you made a loss every time and you didn't make a gain, you didn't make an increase. So this verse is zahir with respect to the permissibility of trade and the illegality of usury. Okay, that's what is zahir. So you can just by hearing those words, Allah SWT has made legal trade and He's made impermissible riba. As soon as you heard those words, if I was to ask you what do they mean to you, you'll say, well, clearly I can understand that trade is permissible and riba is impermissible. So that's zahir. But the nas, the nas which is a higher level, that is there to differentiate between trade and usury. That's the nas. So you can see how even in the same ayah, we can determine different rulings. And our aim is obviously to go to the higher form in various points. Okay. Now, there's a number of other examples I can give you. One example is urine, for instance, and we had a situation, an episode which took place when certain individuals, a tribe of people, came to Medina from Al-Urayna, and what they found was when they were in that particular area, they struggled with the climate of Medina because of the Meccan climate, the Medinian climate was very different. We also saw a similar episode with Bilal and with Sayyidina Bilal and Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhuma. When they also came to Medina, they found it difficult. The Sahaba faced difficulties, and leaving their home wasn't easy, and leaving Mecca wasn't easy. But also at the same time, arriving in Medina was also challenging. This same thing happened to these people. Their stomachs got swollen, their faces were a bit of a pale colour. So the Prophet ﷺ suggested to them that they should go drink from the camel milk and the camel urine. And when they did this, they got better. Okay. And so this is nas in terms of clarifying the means of curing, and also, but it's zahir in terms of the permissibility of drinking urine. We can gain that straight away. But the nas required an explanation. We couldn't see that immediately until the Prophet mentioned it, that look, go drink that. So clearly the Prophet knew that there was a cure in that urine for these individuals. But then we have another statement from the Prophet in which he says, stay away from urine, beware of urine, for indeed the main reason in which why people get punished in the grave is because of it. Now here we see that nas here is the necessity of refraining from urine. Yet it was zahir in the other evidence. So it was zahir in the other evidence of drinking urine, but nas in this evidence for avoiding urine. And the nas in the other evidence was the cure in urine. Now, we're going to put that to one side for now. So let's just focus on the permissibility of, or the purity rather, of urine, or the impurity of urine. From one piece of evidence, we find it zahir, or claiming the purity of urine, because permissibility of drinking urine is clearly, you're not avoiding it. You couldn't really do anything more than that. Whereas in the other case, we see that Rasulullah ﷺ is clearly saying that stay away from urine. Why? Because it is the main cause for punishment. And one can understand from this that is actually referring to drops on clothing, on parts of the body when a person answers a call of nature. So this is nas. Now nas has to be given priority over zahir, because I gave you the ranking order. If you remember, we had zahir, we had nas, we then had mufassar, and then we had muhkam. Okay, they were the ranking order. So when something is muhkam, it overrules the others. When something is nas, it overrules zahir. So we have to. You can see that, the complicated, detailed approach. First of all, you can imagine the knowledge which these scholars possessed in terms of having all this. I'm having to remind myself by looking at my text itself about the narrations. But these individuals, mashallah, have proficient memories and exceptional skills, and they would have all this information at hand. So then they would be able to, and then they would then be sort of, adding a value to each evidence. And once this value was added, then it was comparing various values against one another in order to then derive a hukam, a ahkam. So it's a very intricate, detailed, complicated process. And now, years of work and centuries of work afterwards is dismissed, with the back of an eyelid, and no one really sort of cares and looks into great detail. And one of the main reasons for this series is to show that the madhab system, and in this particular case the Hanafi madhab system, has clear principles in place in order to deal with scenarios as hopefully I'm demonstrating. So then we've got mufassar. So any possible ta'wil or takhsis is ta'wil is interpretation, takhsis is specificity, to specify something. So we have in the verse of the Quran, Allah SWT mentions that all the angels prostrated, all of them together. And this is in ayat surah 15, ayat number 30. So the angels here is zahir. So when you hear the word angels, al-malaika in the plural, that clearly suggests that it must be all of them. However, the possibility of, it might mean most of them. It could be not all of them. So that exists. So when Allah SWT then said all of them, someone could say, yeah, but all of them, but they could have done it in shifts. They could have done it in different times. Maybe the angels in the heavens prostrated first, or maybe the angels in the vicinity of Adam ﷺ prostrated first, then those who saw them, then those who saw them. It's a possibility. But when Allah SWT then said together, then that dismissed that as well. So this becomes mufassar, where in this case Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses words which come after, which remove any possibility of ta'wil and removes any possibility of specificity, if I can pronounce the words, which is now limiting human effort, human interpretation of the verses. Clearly then mufassar takes a higher rank over nas, because here now there's very little human involvement whatsoever in terms of what did Allah SWT mean by that. There's very little scope. And then muhkam, which is the top, is the strongest in strength, even than mufassar, and it is not permissible to oppose it in any way, to interpret it in a certain way, to remove it in a way. So when Allah SWT says, He is all knowledgeable, Allah is knower of all things, when He says something like that, when Allah says, indeed, Allah is knower of all things, and He's mentioned that in numerous verses, then this is muhkam. So we don't say Allah is knower of all things. Does that mean all the time? Does that mean before they happen? Does that mean after they happen? Does that mean... No. Does that mean only actions which are good actions? No, there is no ta'wil, no specificity, nothing to be, there's nothing, no question, no interpretation, no ta'wil required, nothing required whatsoever. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed Allah is knower of all things, then that is it, full stop. He is knower of all things. It's muhkam, it's absolute, it's the strength in reality, and there is the ruling of both Mufassir and Muhkam is it is necessary to act upon them without any shadow of doubt whatsoever. There's no, we could, when we went back to Quru, and the word was mushtarak, and it required human effort, as I demonstrated, to make it mu'awwal, in order to say, this is referring to hayd, not to tuhur, even though equally those madhahib who adopt it as tuhur also validate the argument. So that shows that the Sharia permits at that level where the words are mushtarak a number of valid views based on these four madhahib. But when it comes to muhkam and mufassar, that's not open to interpretation, that's not open to discussion, that's not open to debate. That's a signed, sealed, delivered, finish matter. I'm conscious of time, and I'm not really even made any headway to what I wanted to sort of cover in this first part, and I don't want to make it too long, to be honest. Let's see if we get somewhere near an hour, then I'm hopefully I'll pick up some pace. But it's available in the text. So then we look at the word mushkil. So we had khafi, if you remember. And then we've got mushkil, and then we've got mujmal, and then we've got mutashabih. There were the four different equivalent on that way. And I could give you examples to also mention that, but for being conscious of time, I'm not going to go into that sort of discussion. I hope you're getting a flavour in our discussion today to be able to sort of clearly understand the complicated nature of the usul, the legal theory of any madhab. In particular here we're looking at the Hanafi madhab, and how it's been well thought out, well structured to analyze at word level the Quran and the Sunnah, to analyze it at word level, and from that word level to at the same time take a holistic approach. So we're comparing, the ulama were comparing evidence against another evidence. When they were equal, it was a different approach. Verse of the Quran and verse of the Quran, mutawatir hadith, verse of the Quran. When the evidences were comparably different in terms of authority, in terms of power, then there was a different approach. There was dismissing. But here for now, we've done a very good word analysis, and I have really, not even skimmed the surface, to be honest. What about more ayat, longer statements? What do we make of that? And this is a discussion that we find in Usul al-Shashi referred to as muta'allaqat al-nusus, textual indications. And there's four in particular that are mentioned: ibaratun nas, isharatun nas, dalalatun nas, and iqtida'atun nas. Iqtida'atun nas. And, ibaratun nas, the purpose the statement was brought for. Isharatun nas is that which is established by the text without increasing upon the words. We've seen an example, lil fuqara al muhajirin ladina ukhriju min diyarihim. We see an example there, the poor people, the poor emigrated fuqara. Fuqara means poor. Those who were exiled, ukhriju min diyarihim, yani those who were exiled from Mecca. So we can see here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to them as fuqara. He refers to them as fuqara. So we can see here that they are poor. And it indicates that in this case, when the non-Muslim enemy, the mushrik enemy of Mecca, when it overpowered the Muslims and it took their wealth, it was a means of establishing the ownership for the non-Muslim. So that's giving an indication upon there. Dalalat al-nas is known in terms of illah, and illah is the effective cause, basically, and we discussed that rather in the Takhrij al-Manad and Tahqiq al-Manat earlier, if you recall. We see here, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرُمَا, and don't say to them, i.e. your parents, uff, and no scold them or reproach them or tell them off or being evil towards them. So a person will understand obviously that the word uff meaning don't show any, so you can't express any anger or displeasure either to them. Okay, and likewise they could extend it further and say, well, that would mean that I can't also hit them, even though the verse doesn't say don't hit them. They will understand, they will apply reasoning to that to say that was the case as well. But if the word uff meant I love you, okay, and the Quran said فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا uff, then the literal approach would be somewhat a little bit stuck, because they say, well, hold on, the Quran literally says don't say uff, but the people who speak this language say uff when they're exclaiming love to each other, saying I love you. Now how are we going to move forward with this? We're in a bit of a scenario here where we're going to have to contradict the Quran. So the literal approach would be somewhat a little stuck, okay, as to how to deal with it. Whereas the traditional approach will say, well, hold on, because the word in this urf plays a part, culture plays a part, the use of language plays a part, as we've demonstrated throughout our discussions since the hermeneutical approach episodes. Therefore, the word uff, if it means a good thing, then it's mustahab to act upon. Somewhat looking at, because the meaning is what's being sought. When Allah is saying فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ, the word uff here is referring to expressing displeasure, showing signs of unhappiness towards them, or even going further and expressing anger towards them. But the word uff itself, if it means I love you, then that's not what this verse is talking about. So there's nothing wrong with that. There is the other types of muta'allaqat al-nusus which I could go into, but I won't, being conscious of time. Then there's even goes down to letter level. Now we had word level, we had ayat level, now even word level. Okay, did I say word level? Letter level, I should have said. So what if in certain cases the letter fa is used? What if the letter waw is used? What if the word thumma is used? And the reason why I've included it is because thumma is sometimes considered as a letter in terms of its application, because it's a conjunction, it's a preposition. Conjunctions and prepositions are those which come under the wider concept in Arabic as huruf rather than ism or fi'l. Bal, lakin, aw, hatta, ila, all these others. So we have that. Furthermore, we have, I'm sure you're already waving the white flag and possibly pressing pause on the video, either to come back to it later or giving up on it. Now, I hope you're not going to give up on it, so be patient with me. You can see me sort of flicking the pages and you're thinking, how much more is he going to do? I won't, sort of keep it going for too long. I did say when I reach the hour mark, I'll be able to make a better decision. But for now, bear with me, please. If it's proving a little bit too much, then maybe press the pause button and go for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and come back revitalized. But again, I would recommend the text itself, because this will be a lot easier. You can go at your own pace. And similarly with the videos, this is just to give you an overview. We're not going to make you Usul specialists so that you can now go off and start applying Usul. It's an appreciation that we're trying to bring about. Then we have a section, Imam Sahib in Usul Shashi mentions a section on Bayan, as it's referred to. And Bayan is split into 7 types rather. Bayan al-Taqrir, Bayan al-Tafsir, Bayan al-Taghyir, Bayan al-Darura, Bayan al-Hal, and Bayan al-Atf, and finally Bayan al-Tabdil. So in terms of meaning, Bayan al-Taqrir is an explanation of confirmation, Bayan al-Tafsir, explanation of exposition, Bayan al-Taghyir, explanation of modification, Bayan al-Darura, explanation due to necessity, Bayan al-Hal, explanation due to state, Bayan al-Atf, explanation due to addition, and Bayan al-Tabdil, explanation of change. And then we have much discussion along those sorts of lines. So that's really the sum of the discussion with respect to the Quran and the Quran Kareem. And I've not really gone into great detail, to be honest, in there. Next, we'll turn our attention to Sunnah, and I'm not really gonna go into too much detail because it's going to be too much, and you can sort of go to this in your own time. We had Khabar, for example, and what its ruling is. According to Ahnaf, we also push it up to Mashhur as well, so that a Khabar can become Mashhur. There is Mutawatir, and Mutawatir is talking about bringing about ilmi qat'i, and Mutawatir here is referring to a large number of people from a large number of people, meaning that this is, virtually impossible to believe that it is false. Such a large number of individuals. In fact, the Quran has reached to us through Mutawatir. A large number of people reporting from a large number of people all the way down until it was recorded in as a script, and then even then after that. Mashhur is something which started off as a ahad hadith, a less known narration, and then it became widespread in the second and third generation. And so it became Mutawatir after a couple of generations. For example, the wiping on the khuf is a hadith which was originally ahad and it became mashhur. I could have some really heavy details with respect to the manner in which mashhur, what kind of ilm does it bring about? Ilm tamanina, makes a person content. To reject it is bid'ah, and illegal modification, and illegal development. And when is a khabar wahid accepted? When isn't a khabar wahid accepted? How is it understood? What if khabar wahid opposes zahir, the obvious meaning of the text? What should be acted upon? All the methodology for this exists and it's been recorded. And again, I would suggest picking up the text and going through it at a slower pace. And even having said that, the text you'll find here within the book itself is also very succinct. Usul Shashi is not really the Usul book. There are many others which are in great detail, which explain this the concept. So it's this is not to make you go away thinking that's it, I've understood it. It takes years of study just to get an idea of Usul. Never mind then to be able to apply it. Third discussion is regarding ijma, which is consensus, and this is in matters of furu ad-din and not in the usul ad-din. These are the sort of periphery where ijma can be applied, and it's an honor given to the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, in which they can act upon, and it can be acted upon in various ways. Let me give you the number of examples that it can be. One is ijma of the Sahaba upon a particular matter, an incident which occurred. The other one is the companions' consensus that is brought about by the Sahaba's consensus, which is brought about by the suggestion of some and the silence or remainder of the others rejecting it. The third type could be the consensus of those who came after them on a statement of the call of the Salaf, and then it could be the consensus on a single statement of the Salaf. So those are the four types of ijma that exist. The ijma of the Sahaba verbally, the ijma of some Sahaba suggesting and the others remaining silent. That's number two. Number three is the ijma of those who came after them when they couldn't find a statement of the Salaf from the previous generation, in this case the companions. And then the consensus of the later generations, the mutaakhirun, on a single statement of the Salaf. So this is the system that we have in place. And then there's certain rulings which are associated with that. So you can see that the ijma is quite high. An ijma of the Sahaba, Imam Shashi has brought, where was I? I was just looking at a minute ago. Yeah, so the first type of ijma is the rank of a verse from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second type of ijma is the rank of mutawatir. The third type is the rank of mashhur from the narrations. And the fourth type is in the rank of sahih from the ahad. So you can see the ijma is very, very high. We're not here talking about, ijma is sort of coming after when the Quran and the Hadith finish. We're talking about the Sahaba statements are highly regarded. So the Khairul Qurun, the best of nations, the best of generations, the Sahaba, the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in hold a very high status legally, not just from a pious point of view or from a spiritual point of view, from a historical point of view. They also hold from a legal point of view, which cannot be underestimated. And once we start to undermine and once we start to lose respect and not hold the statements of Sahaba highly enough, we are actually challenging the foundations of our own legal theory and our own legal structure, which clearly leads to a complete disarray. Again, when we're referring to consensus, particularly the fourth type of consensus, and really now consensus exists when those scholars who possess ijtihadic skills and are at the forefront of research when it comes to new matters, and then they will discuss with colleagues to sort of share those ideas with colleagues and reach some kind of consensus. And when they reach some kind of consensus, that can also be considered as a consensus now. When a number of scholars come together. So we're talking here about the scholars of Rai meaning those who can profess opinion, do legally have the capacity to express opinion, and Ijtihad. It clearly doesn't include the opinion of Awam or the Mutakallimun, the theologians, nor the Muhaddithun, the Hadith experts who have no insight into Usul al-Fiqh. This is clearly for the Fuqaha, for their expertise. So it's democratic, but democratic for those individuals who are in a position to express their opinions. So that then brings me nicely on to the fourth discussion, which is regarding analogical reasoning, and I sense approaching the hour mark, and I'm hopeful that inshallah ta'ala that within the hour we will be complete, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. The fourth discussion, analogical reasoning. And analogical reasoning has its evidence. In fact, it's just brought to my mind that if you watch one of the other videos, which I'm trying to recall which it is should we follow the Quran, a Sunnah, or a madhab, or words to that effect, you'll find that I've touched upon an evidence, the proof for accepting qiyas. Is the hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu when he was sent to Yemen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a governor. And you see its evidence there. There's many other places which are mentioned here. Within Usul al-Shashi itself and within the translation that I put together, and it's applied. It's a legal applying, which is put across and applied to others. We can see, and there's two types of. We've seen this qiyas al-Sharia, the Sharia reasoning. We have, for example, the cat, or the animal that used to come in and drink from water from the vessels, and its qiyas is being done upon maids and maidens, maids and slaves who used to come in. So, for instance, we have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that there's no sin upon you nor upon them, because some of them are tawafun, regular visitors upon you, and some of you upon them. He mentioned this in Surah 24, ayat number 58, and this was when people had maids and servants in the house, and when they were obviously coming in and out of room, it would be very difficult for them to constantly knock on the door and ask for permission, because they were just sort of wandering around. So permissibility was given that they didn't need to ask for permission, due to what? Due to the illa being kathrat at-tawaf, due to the large number of meetings, of going in and out each other's room. We also saw Rasulullah mention that with respect to the cat. He says the cat is from the tawafun and the tawafat, meaning it's difficult to control the cat's coming and going as well. So we have a case 2 type of qiyas. And the case 2 type of qiyas that we have is the seeking permission was proving difficult for the maids and the servants. And the illa hukam, the illa which was the coming and going, so that was case 2. So the no was seeking permission, the jins was difficulty, and the illa was coming and going. We found that similar in the cat. The illa was the same, which was coming and going. The jins was the same, which was difficulty. The difference was the no, the basic purity of water. So through this analogical reasoning method, this case 2 method, we saw that the ruling of the considering the water pure, even though a cat has drunk from it, which a cat has and normally does eat, well, did in days where there was no cat food, would eat mice and any other creature it could get its teeth into, and there's a possibility then of that blood being on the cat's mouth, that this cat, even though it drank from this water, which logically speaking should be disposed of, but because it would prove so difficult because the cats were regularly coming inside and outside the house, the water was considered pure. And that was based on the the rationale, the legal base, the legal rationale of coming and going. And so the asl from the maid and the servants was then transferred to the fard, which was in this case the purity of water. So you can see how reasoning is working here. And how it's being applied. And the illah was discussed in great detail as well, you know, when it was exploring the sabab and the illah. When the sabab and the illah come together, what ruling should be applied, what ruling shouldn't be applied. But I do really feel now that we're bordering on pushing you over the edge, and that's not my aim. So I'm going to sort of refrain from going any further with that, and just kind of come back to the rulings now. So now we're entering a nice comfortable zone again. We have different types of we have different gradation of rulings. We have fard, okay, which is compulsory and is established by a definitive source. And because it's established by a definitive source, it has to be applied on. There's no doubt in it. This ruling is necessary, and it is also necessary not only to act upon, it is necessary to believe in as well. We then have wujub or wajib, which is for the ahnaf. And the wajib is something which is not to the ruling of fard. Why? Because it's established by an evidence which does have some doubt, like a Quranic verse which has been interpreted, or a sahih narration. Okay, so it's slightly different. In that case, we still say it is fard in some respects and it's nafil in other respects. What is it fard in? It's fard in acting upon. So like we have the 3 witr salah, which are wajib, it's fard to act upon it. So in which bit is it nafil? It's nafil with respect to believing that it is fard. Okay, that's where the nafil element is. We then have the sunnah, and we've mentioned the various types of sunnah. And then there is nafil, which we've already, and then there's something called rukhsa, which is concession that is given for ease. And I think really that kind of sums it all. Now, hopefully I've not gone too much over an hour as I originally planned. That will cover what I wanted to cover for part 1. In part 2, if you dare to join me, we're going to explore the role of the mujtahid. We're going to go a little bit more into reasoning, and particularly something called istihsan. And we'll then be able to go on to urf as well, which is a very interesting topic, especially when we're looking at our context now in Britain. Urf has changed. We were in Muslim dominant societies when the books of fiqh were written. We're now in Muslim minority societies. How does that affect things? We'll then, based on the back of that, we'll look at darura, because now again, out of necessity, we have to adopt certain practices. We will look at other hiyal and makharij, and look at again the rulings a little bit more, and that will really bring us then to the final section, which is looking at the qawaid al-fiqhiyya, before we finish the second part of 2 parts, exploring the Usul al-Fiqh according to the Hanafi school of law. I hope in this hour, in this part, I've been able to demonstrate the intricacies, the complicated nature of the legal theory which underpins all of the fiqh. That is not some wishy-washy, not well thought out, not well planned, only specific to certain scenarios type of legal theory. It is a legal theory which is based not on the surroundings a person finds himself in, because a legal theory has to base itself on the sources. That does not mean, as we'll see in part 2, that it does not take into consideration the context. Of course it does. But the legal theory is above that, it is separate from that. The reason why I'm mentioning this point is the accusation, or some people may push towards, let's revisit the legal theory. Well, there's no need to revisit the legal theory, because the Quran hasn't changed and the Sunnah hasn't changed. And the legal theory was applied on those sources, applied by individuals who were closest to those sources, applied by individuals who were spiritually and from the best of nations, best of generations rather. To say somebody now, centuries later, not having the same level of expertise in Arabic, not having the direct sources available to them, not learning directly from Sahaba and Tabi'in and Tabi'in, how an individual can reach that kind of status and maqam, and then not necessarily walk over the same areas that these large number of scholars have already walked over. It's highly improbable to even suggest that. So the legal theory is, as we can see, clear for all to see, and it's also clarifying the approach that can be taken. I hope that I've met my objective for today, which was to give you this overview of the Usul al-Fiqh, to explain its complex nature, to just skim over it and fill you with some confidence that the legal theory which the Hanafi madhab is based upon, and other madhab, by not mentioning the other madhab, I'm not saying that they're not based on a sound legal theory. This is an area which I've studied, and hence the reason why I'm sharing it with you, and it's an area which I've researched on. So for that reason, I've shared that particular legal theory with you. They are adequately, equally as applicable and sound as we can see within the Hanafi school approach. I hope I've been able to demonstrate that. And maybe you've picked up one or two things as well along the way to try to understand how the Usul al-Fiqh works. Next part, inshallah ta'ala, we will explore those particular areas, now focusing more, moving away from the legal theory based upon text, but now exploring legal theory. How does it take context into consideration? How does it take scenarios which are not the norm? How does it take these new paradigms which we're now in? How does it deal with that? Does it deal with that? So that's the area we're going to explore next. I hope you can join me on that particular episode afterwards, inshallah, as well. Jazakumullah khair for your attention. I hope I've not put you to sleep. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح يسعك الفضل